discussed all day, there is no one family office strategy, there is no one investment strategy, and there's no one philanthropic strategy. Every family is different, every family's needs are different. So what we try to do is provide education on various structures that might be appropriate for a family, anything from should you be in a donor advised fund, or do you want to start your own foundation? Do you need a charitable remainder trust? Do you need, just educating people on what exists. And what we do with Force for Good, which is what we call our philanthropic position, is we amplify the work that different families are doing in the hopes of finding collaboration amongst families. Because families have flexibility in a way that most organizations do not. If you're a traditional nonprofit, you're seeing a competition for funding. So oftentimes you're working on the same issue, but you're not working together to actually achieve the issue because you're afraid of losing your donor base to the other nonprofit. Whereas if you're a family foundation or being funded by a family, you're often willing to work together to actually solve the mission. So for example, if one family is working on human trafficking, but their family is focused on extracting somebody from danger, and another family is working on rehabilitating someone who's been trafficked, what we try to do is bring them together and say, hey guys, meet each other, share your resources, share your knowledge, and let's actually solve the issue. So that's what we do. We amplify other people's good work in the hopes of really getting collaboration, and we provide education and resources for people that have assets but are not exactly sure what they want to do with them yet.
Gotcha. And just before we move on to Ken, would you discuss a typical problem that a family office comes to you with in regards to philanthropy?
Well, I would say that frequently if you have a large family, there can be a huge discrepancy on what is cared for or cared about, especially if you're like in a multi-family office and you have 2,000 cousins, you're not going to necessarily agree. So then it becomes, do we make this part of our family contract, like our family focuses on cancer? Or do we allow everybody to sort of have a certain amount of money and let them discover their own passion, discover what they want, which I personally think is the best way. I think a lot of people have issues with putting their name, if their name is well known, behind anything. And so what I've done, you'll see my ridiculous purse right here, because I'm into dogs. So like for me, when I do my philanthropic giving, I do it in my dog's name. That way nobody's harassing me, nobody's finding me, they're not hitting me up, and my dog gets a legacy, and everyone wins. So sometimes I've actually had families who don't want to be anonymous, but don't want to attach their name, and I've said, well, why don't you do it for your cat? And then it will give like internal joy.
Great to know. Okay. Ken, as CEO of Aqualance, what type of investment management services are most prevalent to your clients and why?
Interesting question. And to be clear, we don't do investment management. We do a lot of investment reporting. And our highway is really financial administration. So bill pay bookkeeping, multi-entity accounting, and investment reporting. And the one thing that a lot of our clients are coming to us with is something that's been mentioned earlier in these discussions, is direct investing. There's a huge amount of pullback, and this pullback from hedge funds, pullback from public equity markets, and focus on private companies that people can invest in, get a return, and use their expertise to push it. And those are more difficult to administrate, more difficult to respond to, because there is no necessarily structure around that. People are going through, even private equity funds, there's generally a pretty good reporting structure. For a lot of the direct investments, there's not. And I'm seeing a great deal of that, a lot of demand for it. We've stood up software that allows us to handle sort of the more complex investing structures that people are doing. What I often call fundless funds, where there's multiple investors pooling into a particular asset, and they have to be managed appropriately, with hurdles and waterfalls. Sometimes there's deal-by-deal allocation flow with different real estate pieces all within one entity. All of that is taking place. We can get direct fees from custodians, but surprisingly, there's not as much of that in a lot of the family offices that we deal with. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, I love dogs too, so. I
Give
like
him your
it.
dog's name,
And
give him a legacy.
I've advised families over the years, don't do this in your name, don't create a private foundation that is the Eiler Family Foundation, because then everybody knows it's you. Create, the fluffy family, so.
We call it Paulanthropy.
We are, we are aligned.
Pedro, moving on to Pedro. So as a partner at Vinci Partners, a publicly traded NASDAQ firm with 350 funds or vehicles and 38 partners with complementary experiences, which strategies and allocations would you suggest for family offices to invest in right now?
Right, thank you for the invitation again, great to be here. I think Vinci, it's just give a little bit of background, and especially listening to the previous panel, been very US focused, and we are, let's say, emerging markets manager, with the other side focused on Brazil. We are a firm that was founded in 2009. We span out from a very sophisticated investment bank that had been sold to UBS in 2006, and then we founded the firm in 2009, and we've been growing the business since then. We started the firm with about 30 people, and we're about 300 people now. We're managing $12 billion across asset classes, and we are eventually a diversified alternative manager across the asset classes, spanning from private equity, infrastructure, credit, hedge funds, special situations, and real estate. We don't do venture capital as of now. This could be a change in the future, but this is not an area of focus for now. Really, and we do have, let's say, investors that invest in our own funds across the strategies from pretty much everywhere in the world. A big chunk of that capital does come from U.S. investors. And it really depends on the people here were saying every family office is a family office, or every family is a family, so it depends on the risk appetite, obviously, but we believe we do provide diversified superior return that justifies the risk of, taking currency risk, or taking another country risk, or eventually taking liquidity risk, many of the things the previous panel discussed. So we do believe that we are very competitive on the equity side and on the private equity and infrastructure side. We've been attracting a lot of capital to these strategies from global investors.
And Pedro, forgive me if I'm wrong, at Vinci Partners, you guys really focus primarily on South American investments, correct?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry if it wasn't clear. We do invest in Brazil specifically, and our positioning really is to be, let's say, a country focused specialist. So it's a lot of questions about how to go to emerging markets, right? And in our opinion, really go with the specialists in each of the geographies, right? It's really hard to manage, especially if you go more and more on the private side, to manage those investments from far away. So really having people on the ground and alignment of interest and really hands-on is what we believe the way to go, regardless if it's Brazil or anywhere else that's in the emerging space.
Thank you, Pedro. And Peter, as founder and CEO of Global Family Offices, what type of advisory and risk management services do you think are most important right now to family offices?
Right, so first, so just so you know a little bit about QP, we actually look after 9 separate single-family offices. It's quite a bit different model of typical multifamily offices. Everything's in the family's names, and we're just, instead of each family's going out and hiring a new team on their own, they hire us as a team of senior experienced family office executives to come in and set up and run their family offices. So we offer just about every kind of service to them. Whatever family needs, we'll figure out for them. We'll keep auto washer for chief investment officers and usually chief operating officers, not chief financial officers. If you think about it, we step in as C-suite and overlook the family's entire balance sheet, entire life. And so our whole mission is to help families make more informed decisions about their wealth and family well-being. And so we see and try to help them with just the broadest range of problems and questions and strategies across everything. So the kind of service that we offer in risk management, most of our families have made an inordinate amount of money, so our first job is not to make sure they don't lose it. And that's particularly important in times like now. So risk management pervades everything we do and through investments. It's all about prospective risk versus reward for every investment.
Peter, would you mind just elaborating a little bit about the private deals services or syndications you offer?
Family office investing, I would call it, is a huge advantage for our families in that we invest with no boundaries, with no constraints. We can go anywhere in the world, in any asset class at any time. And we spend a great deal of time collaborating with other families around the world to find good investments, as well as with emerging and niche managers around the world to find the best, we think, prospective returns. So we see constant deal flow coming over to fire.
So Lisa, does Force Family Office recruit in talent, and then if they do, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think any business recruits talent, but it's, I hate to say this because it's actually one of the problems with the world. We don't always look outside of circles, which maybe we should. I think that frequently you hire talent based on schools you know, people you know, relationships you have. Force is very small, so Force is a very intimate group. I think it's very different, but one of the things philanthropically that we do is actually help a lot of other companies in their recruiting techniques, and we have found there are many organizations, one is called STARS, where you can find incredibly talented people that don't have college degrees, and I know this is a college and a degree is wonderful, but you can find people that are coders, that know Python, that have all these skills, and we're actually educating a lot of our families who own portfolio companies and saying, listen, what are you guys doing on recruiting, and how are you recruiting more ethically, and how are you recruiting in a more diverse fashion? And that also comes to retention of talent. I think people have to understand this is not just like a passing fancy of we need to be more diverse. I think it comes down to how do you attract people, but how do you keep people? And you keep people when you have an organization that allows for growth and allows for talent and allows for people to come from different backgrounds. So Force is a bad example because we're a very small organization, so of course we're going to lean on each other for referrals when we need new talent. But I think any kind of organization that has, say, 100 employees or more, they really need to start looking in different places. And one of the things we try to do is give them resources to do that.
Gotcha. Thank you, Lisa. And Ken, before I ask you about recruiting new talent, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind commenting on your proprietary bill flow system technology.
Sure. So bill flow systems is actually our secret sauce. It's something that allows us to scale some of our core services at a very high level. We work with hundreds of families right now, and we could theoretically add thousands without a whole lot of pain. Except to get into the recruiting talent, we have to have people who provide the services. But the software is designed really to manage a family's bill payment process in a proactive manner, and this is the key. If you think about any business, they have an accounts payable department, bills come in, they review them, they get paid. If the vendor hasn't gotten their money because the bill didn't come in or didn't be paid or whatever, they call up the business and they say, hey, you didn't pay this. And the business goes, okay, you need to pay, and it happens. With personal bills, that's not what happens. If you don't pay your Florida real estate tax payment, the house goes to tax auction really quickly. If you don't pay your utility bills, they cut off the power. And that's what we are managing for our clients. We're proactively dealing with these types of things. So the way that the system works is there's an optical character recognition, OCR, on the front end. And if the system recognizes a certain amount of fields, there's a learning engine, it allocates the right family, the right home, the right asset class, the right count, automatically. And then it's also analyzing, is that bill within spec? So if you think about it, 90% of the family's bills are recurring. And even if it's once a year, they're recurring. There are the one-offs that come in, they don't want to buy anything, that's fine. We'll deal with those separately. But we generally know about how much the bills are going to be and when they're due. So that's what's in our system. Every single bill for every single client, we know that your utility bill for your Aspen house is due on the 30th of the month. And by the 20th, we're looking at that and saying, do we have the bill? Is it within spec and it's ready to go? Or is there a problem? It's out of spec or we don't have the bill. So we're looking for that. We're looking to make sure that it's paid on time. And that's really the key to managing all of this at scale. So the relationship managers that every client has are looking at the exceptions. They're not keying every single invoice and dealing with the minutia. They're dealing with when things are out of spec, and they're spending more time relating to the clients. And that's a key. Just sort of touching briefly on the recruiting aspect. When we hire people, they have to be people. They have to interface with generally very nice, but often demanding clients. And that's sort of the first criteria. Thank you for asking. I'm really proud of that software.
So Pedro, obviously having a resilient, exclusive focus, that must make recruiting a little bit unique for your company, for Vinci Partners. Do you mind elaborating a little bit?
Yeah, sure. We have 4 offices. So Rio, São Paulo, Recife, which is a city in the northeast of Brazil, and here in New York. So obviously, I would say New York is different for obvious reasons, and we have less people per office. So I'll focus on Brazil, which I believe is what was your question. We have so we grew from about 30 people to 300 in just over 10 years. So obviously, this has been a key area of focus to the firm. We do have an in-house department that is focused on receiving CVs, not only from our own networks, but really open space and going through the universities and participating in events and so on. And we're currently interviewing people because we're going to need more people, obviously. So this is kind of a partially done in-house. And the vast majority of the people that we hire, they start in our operations team. So it's kind of a cultural thing for the firm, where they first really get to know the kitchen, let's say, and then once over time then there are internal processes that we promote the people from back office or / operations into front office. It's a way also for more junior people to get to know about the culture, get to know about the people, get to know about our processes, our strategies, and then this eventually translates into a more effective hiring process from operations into the front office. If we were to do directly the process into the more investment teams or client-facing teams, we probably have a higher turnover than today. So this really has to be being efficient on the hiring process is crucial.
I'm sorry if I didn't hear you, but how long does the operations front office process take?
It depends. Depends on the pace of growth of the firm. There is no defined firm. Over the last few years, to be honest, has been very good. But it depends. There is no.
No, thank you very much, Pedro. Peter, so as founder and CEO of Global Family Offices, how do you look at recruiting, and are you looking to maybe make any changes moving forward?
A couple of points. First, I think as a group, we probably started 15 and run, some very large family offices around the world. So we've seen every problem, every good thing and bad thing about how to hire people, and different models and so forth. I think we've learned a few lessons along the way. Families, I would say, generally aren't very good at figuring out what they need, and there are not many great sources to go to fill those needs. There are several pretty good recruiters, but the flow of family office doesn't make it like a full-time job for them, so it's kind of niche. I would say that we started QP for the sole reason that it's better to be hired to help than to be the hired help, which is a nuanced thing, but working for families can be very difficult because I've heard this stuff about if you met one family, you met one family. One trait they do have in common is change. And their needs change, their desires change, their objects, their financial picture changes. And it's hard to run an organization when you have a stable organization when you're facing that much change. And that presents a lot of problems when you're trying to staff, figure out what the optimal setup for a family office is, what to bring internal, what to do external, and we try to turn that model up to take away the HR department away from the family and turn it into a more professional relationship. And then we can staff based on their needs, and since our mix of families use things in different waves, it's a better mix and more permanent. And we're not, even running a large family office that has multiple generations, you're still tied to a patriarch. Crap happens. So you're worried about, if either they pass, when they get old, they decide to change their mind and go off and do something else. So that's, you're always, family office is great to work for, but you gotta recognize that fact that, a longevity really of family offices is pretty tough, pretty small.
Can I just add one more point which I think is very important on the implemented, and we have done that in the hiring process, is we believe that the diverse teams make better decisions. Really this has to be embedded in the hiring process for every firm in our view, because at the end of the day, we're going to be the people going in is where you're going to be at some point in terms of how your workforce is divided, right? So for example, our operations team at the mid-level of the firm is already 50-50 men and women, right? So in many emerging markets, this is not, and even in Brazil, and even in let's say the finance world, this is not really a reality, right? So this is something that, just to pick another example, it's something that we can implement.
And before I open it up to the crowd for questions, one more question for Lisa, Ken, and Peter. Are you guys experiencing any pressure from private equity firms or Marathons or BlackRocks or Blackstones about family office services, or them managing the money instead of them coming to you for value-add services?
It's not applicable to what we do at all. So Force is a network of family offices. We share co-investment opportunities, we share education, we share peer-to-peer, and we share philanthropy. But we're not providing services in that way, so we're not a competitor. We frequently will work with a BlackRock on a co-investment or share some of their deals out to some families. So it's not applicable for us.
No, we actually, a couple of our families might have led some of those firms before. So, those people, either retirement or elsewhere, are looking for people, a team that they trust. They're very discerning investors and very sophisticated, so their criteria, and they kind of know that they can't go to they're not going to get what they want or the service and look after by the normal people, so they found us, and so we don't tend to use any of their stuff.
Great. All right, questions, anybody?
I have a question for Pedro. I'd like to hear you speak a little bit about the upsides of investing in an emerging markets. What would you say for a U.S. family office? What are the upsides of investing in countries such as Brazil?
Okay, so started picking private equity returns are about 50% net over almost 20 years. So obviously this is possible because it is, in general, a less, let's say, arbitrage market, right? So there is eventually less competition, information is not so transparent. In the end of the day, the multiples are completely different, right? So the less funds we invested, for example, the average entry multiple is about 7 times EBITDA, and at the same time, it is a pretty much unleveraged portfolio, right? So there's no leverage in the entry multiple. Whereas, for example, in the US now, you're seeing maybe 12, 13, 14 times EBITDA entry multiples, and about half of that EV is debt, right? So this is a big question going forward, in my opinion, right? How will the more mature markets rebalance, right, with a higher level of cost of debt, and at the same time, the multiples will need to compress at some point. So if you look historically, the vast majority of returns in more mature markets has come from multiple expansion and obviously deleveraging the companies after investments. Whereas in our markets, it's the other way around. For us to generate returns, we need to increase the bottom line of the company, right? So that means increasing market share, increasing productivity, entering new markets, and so on, launching new products. So it's really bottom line growth. So it's a very different environment. It's less competitive in a way, but there is also other risks, right? So there is currency risk. There is potentially, depending on the sector you invest, might be some regulatory risk which could be higher, and so on, right? So I believe, obviously, emerging markets do provide the diversification, right? We are seeing now that some emerging markets are, performing very differently from Europe or the US. This has not been really an area of focus if you look over the last 10 years, because the US market and Europe were just providing such a good opportunity set that a lot of the focus, especially if you take a US perspective, has been domestic. But maybe this is going to change with the current environment, right? And our take, in a way, is also that more volatile markets, inflation, more uncertainty. This is, let's say, in our DNA already, right? We were born this way, So looking forward, it's true. So looking forward, we believe, at least on a relative basis, we could be in a better place.
Next question?
I'm just curious, what you think about markets where there's a lot of, I'm talking about emerging markets specifically, where there's a lot of bureaucratic red tapeism, but at the same time, it's very abundant international resources.
She's asking about emerging markets.
Yeah, we very well could be, at least from my viewpoint, a pretty significant shift away from globalization. The last 20 years have been about financial and cheap money, or very cheap money, and central bank policy. And I think we're shifting significantly right now in the process of that. Most U.S. investors are way overweight in the U.S. In the last 10 years, and probably could do well to start looking around the world. Obviously, you should get paid or be careful about the lack of rule of law or how strong it is. But you might get a significant margin of safety that you're not getting here right now. So we're spending a heck of a lot more time on it, and after being, pinch ourselves. I mean, the 2000 to 2009 was a decade, that paid to be in emerging markets, and the last decade hasn't, for things to move in that kind of cycle. So same with commodities. When Glencore went public in 2011 or 10 or whatever, it marked the end of the commodity cycle, and we're probably just starting with another one.
Yep.
Question for Peter. I know you mentioned how you service the different family offices currently at 9, right? How do you determine what products and services, especially on the operational point of view, you're gonna offer them, especially that every family office is different, right? So especially one family office has an idea, they wanna kind of go one route. How do you kind of like make them understand like what you're really offering for them and how, you know, not deviate from, I guess, your services that you provide? You get that often, actually, is the question, I guess?
Well, I mean, they're all buying into the idea that we're their chief advisors and their chief investment officers, and we're running, they hire us to run their family. I mean, when you run a family office, you're not just running this family office that 8 or 10 or 20 people. You're running the entire family organization, which is them and then all the service providers and relationships. So our job is to quarterback on those things and hold everyone accountable. And then you see secret sauce when you start breaking down the silos and getting, you know, optimized, how your accountants and lawyers and tax work together to come up with strategies. So there's only, you know, our families come with different sets of problems. You know, we put on a lens on it that is very purpose-based, so they know what the purpose of the wealth is. Usually, you know, they generally don't worry about retirement.
Yeah.
They want to make some money along the way to pay expenses, you know, along the way, so we should earn good money for that. And then there's a whole bucket of generational transfer, okay? And then there's philanthropy. And usually there's some special asset sitting over here too. It's an operational business or something, and there's flowing in all between all of them. So our job is to help them figure out what the purpose of all these buckets are, what size they're gonna be, and where they're gonna be in 5 years. So to help them figure out, we actually do a strategic, you know, an annual strategic plan for them, help them figure out what their mission is, their values, their goals and objectives, and then we'll build a plan to execute that, in an iterative process over multiple years.
Thank you very much for such interesting comments. I would like to ask you a question, maybe starting with Peter, but whoever has interest in this, please answer. But do your clients ask you to provide them with impact investing services? Is it a hot topic for them? Is it something, or maybe it's not a hot topic, maybe it's more just important for them personally? Thank you.
Actually, in our roster right now, not really.
Not really.
No, we're attuned to the whole movement, and you know, we love to find, you know, good stores of money, which means they're good, usually stores of 360 view. But and we've invested in alternative energy and new science and all those factors, but it's not because of its quote unquote an ESG or impact. It's because it's a good investment.
See, I have a different perspective on that, because I'm more on the impact ESG philanthropy space. So people come to me frequently. You know, we want to get into impact. We've already decided we want to align our assets and our values. You don't have to explain to us what it is, but where do we find the big deals? We still have to actually preserve the capital. How do I explain to granddad why I want to take the money and put it here? And so I'm actually frequently asked for recommendations of impact investments, the difference, you know, the greenwashing and, you know, what's reputable. The question I hate most that comes up nonstop, mostly from more institutional, is like, but how do you measure impact, which happens at every impact conference. But ultimately, yes, I'm finding the younger generation cares more and more. And actually getting back to your recruiting question, I see a lot of my families that I co-invest with or that I'm friends with saying, when they look at a deal, especially a private deal, they'll look at the deck and they'll say, okay, I'm looking at the executive team, I see 5 white guys. I don't want to put my money in that firm. So it's not just about having a better team that's diverse, it's also about attracting investment. The next generation does care about that and is looking at that, and that is actually part of their investment decision and mandate for some families now.
Can I make a question, because a comment on this question, because it's like the interesting one. And so we do have a impact investment strategy within the private equity group. And when we tested this strategy initially, the first reaction from investors was, well, if you're doing impact, you're giving away returns, right? And the first name of the fund would be Vinci, VIG, so Vinci Impact and Governance. We replaced the name or changed the name to VIR, so it's Vinci Impact and Return. because the way we see at least in this strategy, that we don't give away returns to generate impact, and we did attract quite a good amount of investments also from outside Brazil. In fact, we had a meeting last Friday with one of the European investors in this fund, and they said that they're trying to replicate the strategy all over the world, and they said that we are really their benchmark. So we're really happy with that. So we eventually, there is a way to generate impact and at the same time don't give away returns.
This question is for Ken. So Ken, besides the family offices in the room today, there's a lot of managers as well, and I'm sure they're curious to know, as an executive in this industry who has a lot of clients within the space, how do you go about building trust with family offices? You know, how have you been so successful at that? What is your secret?
Well, earlier on this screen was a little bit of Ray Dalio speaking, and one of the things that I've taken away from Ray is transparency. You really have to be transparent, you have to be open, you have to be honest with people. And honestly, it takes time. Sort of tying a couple of things together, Ben, you asked the question about do we get pressure from BlackRock and things like that, and we don't. There's some executives, former and current executives at some of these large funds that are clients. Can't name them, but they're there, and our primary source of clients is RIAs, multifamily offices, trust and estate attorneys. So we have to build often multiple layers of trust with those advisors, with the family ultimately, if they decide to engage with us. And I think it's delivering what you say you're going to deliver, the reporting that we deliver the administration on time, and convincing somebody that, especially an investment advisor, like they're very tight with their clients, and then they turn them over to us for this piece of service, and if we don't do a good job, that reflects badly on that. So that is the way we build trust, is always doing a good job. Again, tying all these questions together, the recruiting aspect, like we have to get people who pay attention, who are detail-oriented, but also personable, who are discreet, because they see a lot of things. We arguably see more than most investment advisors or attorneys. We're seeing medical bills, we're seeing credit card statements, et cetera. And you can't be surprised by anything. You just have to, it is what it is, and you report it accordingly. And doing that for 36 years now has built that reputation and built some trust within the industry. And then it's a matter of expanding on that. And it's not easy. We're very security conscious, everything's locked down, because if anything gets out, that would lose trust. If any of my people talked about our clients in names other than in an abstract way, that would lose trust. So those things are drilled into everybody, all day, every day. I think that's how we do it. Does that make sense, Paul?
Absolutely. I just have one more question for these two gentlemen then. So, you know, considering where we are in the economy today, how involved are your clients as far as investing? Are they actively calling you today saying, hey, Peter, you know, watch out for this, watch out for that? And Pedro, from your side, are they actually calling you as well? Just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work before we got here, and I think as a group, we're very much on our front foot, when you take advantage of opportunities. Again, back to family office investing for the last 5 years when we couldn't solve the math or the risk of investing in most public entities, because we have no constraints, and we are value investors. We found ways to get that kind of return with better risk profile. So there's a lot of preparation. We're actively involved in them. They're not calling us. We're calling them. We do a lot of game planning, a lot of tactical, a lot of strategies to give an idea of what's coming, what we're trying to solve, and then several of the families we work for, either their viewpoint and their input is beyond helpful because of the positions they've sat in before and what they've seen. They were at the heart of the general financial crisis. They were at the heart of many things, and that's how they made their wealth. And so they have contacts and viewpoints that only make us stronger. And so we actively collaborate on those as well to help. A lot to figure out right now. So, and we have our structure, we're the eyes of the world, we can go anywhere, we've got sources and people and all the banks and everything, so it's, that's a huge advantage.
I think our investors calls us all the time, right? Because of the fact that I mentioned before, like about the ups and downs, the volatility is always there. But being transparent with your client is the number one way to go, because then you build trust, and then they start to call you less, because they rely that if there's something wrong, you're gonna be able to reach out proactively as a manager and say, oh, this is happening, let's be proactive, and that's the way we've been doing it for years and years, and we do, our typical investor has been investing with us for a very long time, right? So we started the firm with about $1.5 billion, and we're managing 12 billion, right? So otherwise, if we were not building long-term relationships, we wouldn't be able to grow, right? So being transparent is the way to go, and but obviously in more uncertain times, the level of anxiety goes up, and you have to be there. I think COVID was another example, right? Everyone was, well, what's going to happen? Your retail stores are shut down now. What's going to happen? How you're going to rely on our company? A good way that we did create a kind of a framework to kind of point out with a specific criteria, and then we mapped the entire portfolio in those criteria and sent a report to everyone, like in probably first week of the shutdowns, and the shutdowns in the US and Brazil, they were about the same time. So even before they asked, they had that report, right? So I think that's a way as an example of how we should do it this kind of time.
Yeah, we told them it was coming, so they kind of knew it.
Gotcha. I think that's all the time we have. Or do we? Okay, one more.
I would love to pose a question to the whole panel. We talked about impact investing and some requests or not, and representing a fully female-owned impact investment firm. What kind of balance do you see of impact investment in the liquid equity side versus the request for impact in the private equity side?
I see a lot more in the private.
And percentage-wise on the liquid side?
I think on the liquid side, the problem that comes in is many people are doing their liquid investments through a big bank or an advisor, and they basically say, oh, we have this, ESG portfolio, but when you actually look at it, all they're really doing is extracting you from things they consider to not be good, as opposed to putting you into real innovation. So I find most liquid impact investors are going a little bit more on the private side, but I'm sure right now people would love to find highly liquid ways to be impactful. So I think there's an open-mindedness to it, but I think for many people, their advisors in the public markets are not advising them into a lot of impact.
I agree with that, and I'm seeing a lot more on the philanthropic side as well, where people are trying to find, I've always called it hard philanthropy, where people are describing people get together and actually make something happen. This is my impression. I think there's a little bit of disillusionment with ESG and impact investing, simply because there's been so much, here's what we're gonna do, and there's been a lot of greenwashing where people put up something, hey, we're green, and you dig deeper and they're really not. So people are diverting dollars to, how can I take my philanthropic dollars and actually make something happen? Whether it's alone in my family or with a group of people. And that seems to pull heartstrings, but satisfy people more than just the investing piece.
And people can use their donor advised funds to invest. A lot of people don't know that. That's part of the philanthropic advising. If you have a DAF, you can actually go through DAFs that will allow you to pick private investments, and then, of course, all the returns go to the philanthropy still. It's still, we're committed to philanthropy. You can increase the philanthropy by using your philanthropic dollars to invest in impactful companies that are also changing the world. So, for those of you with DAFs, look into that.
All right, And I think that's it. Thank you very much.